Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's teleconsultation entitled How Can We Optimize the Role and Cost of Cash Across Our Delivery Channels? Today's discussion will be with 4 or 5 speakers, and I will be your moderator. This is Aldo from the Asian Banker. And before I turn on to my colleague Tom Zink, who will be our first presenter, allow me to say a few words. This afternoon's teleconsultation will seek to answer the following questions. What does the client want in terms of cash services? Establishing the cost of cash processing for your institution, ensuring seamless connectivity and integration between all delivery channels, cooperation with third parties for cash service optimization, and addressing security concerns and costs involved. Even with the emergence of e-cash, mobile commerce, and all forms of e-transactions, most emerging markets in the Asia-Pacific region still see cash as very important. So without further ado, I will turn over to my colleague, Senior Research Analyst from the Asian Banker, Mr. Thomas Zink.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our teleconsultation session today. I'm going to share some of our insights from our research, understanding the cost of cash handling in Asia-Pacific, building an integrated cash supply chain to improve cash handling efficiency. We conducted this research in the first quarter of 2011 and were supported by Winco Nixdor. We interviewed about 16 banks for the research, 10 from emerging markets, 6 from mature markets, and also we conducted a survey which was completed by 12 banks. Today's agenda, I will guide you through the key concerns of managing cash. I also will show the key building blocks in the development of efficient cash supply chain management. I will also talk a little bit on issues in the management of the cash cycle, as well as potential areas for cost savings through the optimization of the cash supply chain. Shortly on the Asian Banker, Asian Banker Research is conducting a variety of tasks for the industry. We also have a journal called the Asian Banker Publication, as well as our famous conferences. The key findings of our industry white paper. We identified the main drivers of as cost and security. Key challenges in managing the cost of cash is to find the balance between cost and control over the supply chain. Another key challenge that we found is that multiple players in the cash cycle have to align their work, and that is quite of some difficulty for them, although we also think it is possible. Fourthly, labor costs, the key main cost factor in mature markets, particularly as technology, outsourcing, and process streamlining have significantly reduced other costs, such as machine downtime, excess cash, theft, and insurance costs. However, we found that forecasting accuracy and integration can still be optimized. Fifth, in emerging markets, we saw that most banks at the moment achieve most cost savings from outsourcing labor. In the end, back to balance and control, which is a key theme in our research. Most participants in our research said that they prefer to outsource the legwork, such as maintenance, transport, and refilling to service providers. However, most of the banks we spoke to said that core tasks, such as forecasting, planning the implement of cash in ATMs, in branches, as well as often counting and sorting of cash, is something they keep rather in-house. We were asking the responding banks, what are your key concerns in the cash handling cycle? And not surprisingly, cost was the key concern. about 44% of the overall respondents said that this is an issue for them. That number was even higher in mature markets, where 55% of the respondents said that, whereas only 36% in the emerging markets had said that cost is a key issue for them. Second in line, we found security, which is also noted by the respondent with 33%. Interestingly, this, well, not surprisingly actually, that security is more a topic in emerging markets. That, of course, is due to often lower public security and also lower incomes of the banking staff. That could, of course, foster robbery. You have a higher counterfeit risk. Fraud and internal theft are also an issue. Internal theft also because you have more manual processes, which could which offer opportunities. As third criteria pillar, the respondents marked process improvement. So the point is rather how to increase efficiency in the cash supply chain. Most tried to do that through centralization of tasks and streamlining of processes. But also what comes at a higher level of development, as we will see later, the alignment with third-party providers is an issue here. Lastly, we see transparency and audit traceability, which, however, is not really a big concern for most banks in Asia yet. However, it is more an issue in mature markets where usually the level of outsourcing is higher than in emerging markets, and banks want to be in control of their cash. That's why they are interested in to know where the cash is at the moment. However, we also see that is a bit of a value add from cash in transit providers, which want to assure banks that at all times they know where their cash is, and just to keep them safe and informed. However, in the end, we believe that banks are more interested in the fact that service providers keep up to their service level agreements, and also, well, have the chance to impose penalties if SLAs are violated. I want to spend a bit of time on this graph, which is development, where we try to map the development stages of cash handling in banks. And we did that on two axes. One is control over the cash cycle, and the other one, we have in this axis, as well as cost efficiencies. And we see the development from a manual management in-house over outsourcing to what's an integration of the cash supply chain, and, well, we see the holy grail in an end-to-end currency management. In the gray boxes, we put a logical order of key tasks which are involved in handling cash. More advanced features are in gray, basic features are in beige, and those also helped us to rank banks in their development stages. Lastly, we have characterized the different stages. We have a reactive stage, which is the first one, and banks begin with active management and fine-tuning of their cash supply chain, and in the end, it becomes really a needs-based approach. Generally, we would order most emerging market banks in either the first column or second column, depending on the level of their market. Mature markets instead are more in the. Few of them are still in the second, but most of them, I would say, are already in the third. Very few go into the fourth pillar. However, we have not really seen a single bank that makes it up to the top of a really end-to-end currency management. I think we will hear maybe some more from Vincor on how that could look like later on. Through the mapping against cost and control, we see that banks, when they start their journey towards an end-to-end currency management and begin with the outsourcing of tasks to service providers, lose control, which is indicated in the lower red button here. However, when they proceed and further automate and integrate their supply chain with further, we see that the control is rising again, or at least mitigated towards other service providers, which also helps the banks to make it more efficient. In the end, we expect, with an end-to-end currency management, we expect banks to come up maybe at an even higher level of control over the cash cycle, because third-party providers are able to deliver the services in a more efficient way and also in a more timely manner. And as forecasting and other technologies improve, we see higher control over the cash cycle in the end. We will give you the slides later on, so I don't want to go into the detail of how we classify the banks or how we rank the banks, but have a look on our logical order that we have put in place here. In this slide, I mapped the players of a cash flow cycle and also how they interact with you. Sorry, this slide. And how they interact with each other. I facilitated a bit, so I took out a lot of arrows, because basically everybody interacts with everyone except for the consumer. So, but I tried to map out the key issues that we have, and I will quickly walk you through them. And I think this will also explain a little bit why it is so difficult to align all those players. And I think the key reason for that is that each and every player in the cash cycle has different motivations and different incentives and different targets. I want to begin with the central bank. Well, of course, its motivation is to keep the cash cycle safe and sound and to minimize risk and cost. But what we also see recently is that central banks try to push the cost towards others, meaning cash centers and retail banks. This is even a bigger issue, as central banks earn quite considerable money from delivering cash and lending cash to banks. So it's kinds of high government debt and difficulties in managing the public finances. It's like banks have regulators and central banks have to weigh how they want to deal with seigniorage, which is more or less a cash tax on handling cash. So, as I said, central banks pressure cash centers and retail banks and pass more and more tasks onto those players. Such as, for example, counting is done a lot in cash centers now, counterfeit identification, and also maintaining the fitness of the currency are key issues which the central banks have pushed more and more towards retail banks and cash centers. But also anti-money laundering is becoming more of an issue, of course, here with the tighter regulation that is coming up. When we look at cash centers, those are usually run by a bank, by a conglomerate of banks, or by an independent service provider. And if run efficiently, they are run like a logistics company. Their incentives are simply to minimize the money lying around, because all the money they have in their safe is on their balance sheet and they have to pay for it. Also, they want to increase the efficiency, probably by managing more and more banks at the same time, so one transporter can provide several branches and ATMs with cash. When we look to banks, they run, I would say, the highest risk in the whole cash cycle because they are exposed to regulatory risk, but also to reputational risk on the consumer side. Their incentive is to avoid those risks, of course, and to manage their cost efficiently, but still hold a buffer. So because I think the worst possible case for a branch would be if they run out of cash, because that already has sometimes led to quite some damage for a bank. When we look at branches as a subcategory of the banks, we see that the most challenging process they actually have is the deposit-in process, which hasn't really been re-engineered in the last years or since it began. For sure, it has been automated, and today we see tele-assist terminals and cash deposit machines and counting machines. But it's still a very labor-intensive process with numerous double structures. Like, for example, when cash is deposited in at a counter, you have the teller counting it, you have somebody in the back office counting it again, and thirdly, probably in the cash center, it is counted again. A lot of unnecessary double structures exist, and obviously the best way is to get rid of those through integration with other service providers. When we look to the self-service network, we also see some issues. Who does the refills? How do you assure the accuracy in the machines? How do you optimize and minimize transport to reduce risk of robbery and also to reduce cost? And again, reducing redundancies is a key theme here, while still maintaining control over the whole cash cycle. Lastly, the consumer. Basically, consumer looks for convenience and wants to have constant access, 24/7 access to cash. So banks also, on the other hand, need to manage their customers. Like, for example, it's very inefficient for a bank if the customer goes to the bank every day, just withdraws $50 US, spends it, and next day comes back, because this makes it way more difficult to manage the cash cycle for a bank and the cash accuracy. Lastly, quickly on cash recycling, which, when you think about it, seems like a very good idea, because you simply have deposit in money and redistribute it again to the customers. However, it's still not there. We have a lot of parties that are actually a bit concerned about it. We see, well, most of all, regulators are probably the key obstacle here. We see Japan and Korea allowing it. In Singapore, one bank is deploying cash recyclers. And we also see a few banks in China who have recyclers in place, but this is like more or less the regulators looking another way, both in Singapore and in China. Lastly, what is not clear yet, whether customers would care over taking money from a cash recycler or not. However, we see definitely a trend to two-way machines, which can take deposited money in and give money out. So, but still, the function is not linked. In our survey, we ask for what banks think actually the different cost factors in their cash handling is, and very interestingly, we found that labor cost is a key component here. This is particularly true for mature markets, where we found that over 75% of the costs are due to labor-related. We classify that as transport cost, as labor for refilling, labor in the back office, as well as labor for maintenance. In emerging markets, this number is considerably lower, and I think that makes sense when you take into account that salary levels are considerably lower in emerging markets. But what we also believe is that mature market banks have achieved through process streamlining, through integration of their processes, and through higher technology standards. They have minimized other fields, like, for example, the holding of cash, which is a key cost factor in emerging markets. However, mature markets have considerably minimized this cost factor. We also see that the downtime of machines is more of a cost factor in mature markets. I think this is due to greater reputational risk again. We saw a few banks really getting into trouble when the ATM machines didn't work. That was, one example for that was DBS last year, where the ATM and branch network was down for 6 to 7 hours, and even the regulator became active and scrutinized the bank. And similar things happened, for example, for Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where suddenly ATMs started distributing money which was not even on their accounts. The banks stated that they could get most of the money back. But this is really some high risk that is associated to the downtime of machines. This might be lower in emerging markets because probably also people don't care that much when an ATM is out of cash, so they are used to it. In our next slide, we have mapped. This is a similar mapping of the cost factors, but we have done that by banks in different markets. Here we have listed a few mature markets, where, for example, Korea has the most expensive channel networks, which is indicated by 73% of the total operating cost. However, the cost of cash handling, in terms of physical channel costs, are very, very low, and we also believe that this is probably kind of related to the wide use of cash recycling machines in this country. In Singapore, a foreign bank, the channel costs are relatively low for foreign banks in general in Singapore, because they only have a limited number of branches and ATMs, but they have linked ATM networks with each other. As such, but what we still see here is that handling cash is relatively expensive compared with other mature markets. In Taiwan, on the other hand, we see that currency fitness and downtime of machines are cost drivers, and I hope that Mr. Yao can maybe give us his view on that later on. Same slide, just for a few emerging markets banks. And this is even more interesting because when we, for example, look at the Thai bank, which has outsourced most of its manual labor, but still has higher channel costs compared with the Malaysian or Indonesian banks, which both actually have most of it in-house. However, managing cash or excess cash this bank is way more efficient on the other hand. The Malaysian banks, we found a very in-house centric bank here, which even handles the refilling and first-line maintenance of its ATMs in-house. However, they stated that most of their ATMs are actually in-house in the branches. which makes it a little bit more easy than other banks who have a lot of off-site ATMs. I think the bank still benefits from low labor cost and is also known for its stringent cost management. So I think that shows that also in-house cash handling can be efficient, but with rising salary levels in emerging markets, we will see some more pressure on those banks. When we look at the Indonesian banks, currency fitness and insurance of cash, surprisingly, are key cost drivers. In my last chart, I quickly display the year-on-year changes where banks save most of their cost. I have ordered it according to the emerging markets because this trend is a bit more impressive. So you see that labor from refilling and transport, as well as currency fitness and the related downtime of machines, is where the emerging market banks achieve most of their cost savings, which also kind of reflects their move from to outsourcing, particularly refilling, and also improved machines and better currency fitness. I think currency fitness relates a little bit to the downtime of machines because you have less paper jams. What we see for emerging markets, on the other hand, is that back office labor, the cost went up, which I believe has something to do with that a lot of banks entered the second development stage of my earlier slide, which simply means that they started to outsource a lot of tasks and centralize a lot of tasks. So more back stuff that was previously done in a branch is now done in the back office, which raises the cost at this point. Also, rising salaries, of course, are a cost driver here. When we look at the mature markets, which are the red bars, we believe that the biggest cost savings mature markets achieve is around minimizing the holding of excess cash, which simply means a better, more efficient cash cycle, better forecasting, outsourcing of numerous tasks. A lot of things help here to achieve that. On the other hand, also for mature market banks, back office labor is still a key cost driver. Again, rising salary cost, of course, but also that banks really want to stay in control of a crucial task in the cash cycle, such as counting, for example. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. We have published a white paper on exactly this topic, which goes more into detail on our findings. You can download it from our website. I put the link here on the slide. Thank you very much, and now I pass back to Aldo. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom, for a very detailed presentation. Perhaps before I go to the people from Capricorn Bank, I'd like to ask Ricardo Scori for his few comments, like for 3-5 minutes, probably your comments on the presentation that was made and the trend that you are seeing in the Asia-Pacific region, since you're also a major player in this region. So, Ricardo?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think the presentation really captured the two different trends from both emerging markets and mature markets. In fact, I'm in one of the emerging markets today. I'm participating out of the Philippines, where we can see that security is one of the major drivers for such solutions. Of course, everybody is interested in reducing costs, no doubt, be it emerging or advanced markets, but security comes first and then cost comes second. But if I'm having the same discussion in Australia, the cost factor is number one discussion probably for a few hours. And you did mention something. What are there banks who have applied the whole end-to-end concept, and is it working? In fact, yes, in Europe, in Asia, we are trying now to introduce that. I have many banks interested to start now working on this, but we have seen the results in Europe immediately. So we have the largest now deployment for cash cycle management in Netherlands. Unfortunately, because of NDAs, I can't disclose the name of the bank and the retailer today, but there is a bank and a retailer coming together, sharing one pool of cash. The entire network is managed by Winco Nixdorf in the Netherlands, including forecasting of cash, monitoring of the devices, the complete maintenance of the devices, be it first level, second level, the logistics, CIT, everything. And the savings so far are in the range of over 20% in the total cost of cash. And that's a very impressive figure, because if you take the cost of cash in Europe today, it's in the range of 50 billion euro yearly. So if we take Netherlands as a country, maybe it's 4 or 5 billion euro. And if you take that bank and you say 25% of the savings, we're talking about a huge number of millions of euros. So it works. It's not easy to implement. However, again, I agree, the drivers will be different now market by market. And our interest is by having discussions now with the banks in the region to see how we can help them. Maybe not all the model is applicable. Maybe the subsets of the model can be first applied to deal with a certain area. But then moving on, I think there is room for improvement on all the areas of deficiencies of the cash cycle.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ricardas. Perhaps we can call on now our friends from Cassicon Bank. But as I hand it to them, can we request those people who have questions, please send them over in the chat box. Please type them, and we will discuss them in the Q&A forum. So I would like to hand over to people from Cassicon Bank from the country of Thailand, a very exciting country in terms of banking. I believe Asa Yupong Pitak, the Vice President, Head of Cash and Payment Operation Management, is with us, as well as Sitapon Chaikam, Cash and Payment Operation Management Specialist from Cassicon Bank. So Asa, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Perhaps you can share with us your experience and your challenges in terms of cash management for your bank and your particular place in the Asia Pacific region.
Hi, I'm from Sitapon in Cassicon Bank. So we would like to share about our experience on cash management. So what we are expecting is there are 3 points that we are expecting in the transportation, in cash on hand, at the balance level, and the quality of service. So these are 3 main points that we are focusing on. And the main point, which is the balance of the cash on hand. This is the level where we are expecting for the optimum point of cash. So it is quite similar to like the other banks in the region as well. Okay. Okay, that is all from us.
Okay, thank you very much, Asa. Perhaps you can go back as a question in terms of to my colleague Tom. You were talking about how emerging markets were different in terms of the trends with much more mature markets. So which trend do you see would change more in the future in terms of the cost of cash? I believe you have a slide. I think your 9th or your 10th slide. We can go back to one of them. Yes, the cost. I think the next slide, slide 11. You were saying that I guess I would like to know more about this slide in terms of the trends that you see for mature markets and emerging markets. How do you see the cost changing in the near future? Are there some influences or aspects that would surprise them in the near term or medium term in terms of cost handling of cash?
Thanks, Aldo. Yeah, as I said, there are differences in between emerging markets and mature markets. There is an increasing, well, mature markets have started off the trend, and then now we see emerging markets following. So the whole outsourcing thing is something that has only started very recently in the emerging markets. There are some who are more progressive, like India. Others are very conservative, where really banks do not trust anybody outside their own bank, and they still can do it inside their bank because the salaries are quite low. However, we believe that cost pressures will probably be the main driver that will force banks in emerging markets also to invest more in technology, to do a lot more on the operational side, to streamline the cash handling departments. Some banks really have a whole department looking after that. It's creating a lot of costs in those banks, but still affordable. I strongly believe that we will see change there in the next years.
Okay, thank you. Maybe as a follow-up, I can pose a question to Ricardo. What do you see the emerging trends in terms of, I guess, outsourcing? Do you see more openness in terms of the banks with regards to outsourcing, or since you are a service provider in the Asia-Pacific region, do you see that there's been more tightening of regulation on that front, or more prescription from the regulators in terms of what or what cannot be outsourced in terms of cash management?
Yeah, thanks. I guess from the outsourcing perspective, the concept is gaining acceptance in most markets. I don't see the regulators today putting too much constraints on outsourcing as such. Of course, there are sensitive topics when it comes to the fitness of the currency, when it comes to topics related to the security features of the currency, where, of course, regulators and central banks and all these guys are definitely not comfortable to give it to a third party. But let's talk about the operational process and the logistics of handling cash, the transportation of cash, let's say the analysis of the optimum level of cash, and the complete monitoring and management of the fleet. These are things where I don't think regulators are creating any hurdles today. What I discovered that could be, from the different discussions we have with the banks, of course, could be a trend that is emerging very strongly today, is actually recycling of cash across an individual cash point. So if we look at the self-service channels in the banks, there are more banks asking in 2011 now about recycling devices than I ever had in the last 10, 15 years of my career. So I think that concept of let us reuse the cash in the device itself is gaining acceptance. Are regulators comfortable with that? Not in all markets, of course. Is it proven that it works? Immediately. You see results. Actually, you don't need to wait a year to see the result. You see the results from the first month you deploy the device, because you immediately see a drop in the number of CIT trips. You see savings from the number of people you put on the job. So actually you optimize the overall process that is leading to a saving in terms of cost, but also leading to a saving in terms of reducing the volume of cash in circulation. So the savings here come from different areas. The volume of cash comes from the processes and the number of people working on the job, and comes from the number of trips and CITs. So I would say if someone would like to start today, is starting with a big bang approach of outsourcing is the right way. Maybe not straight away, but going in a phased approach, adopting recycling across a branch environment first. So why not share the cash between ATMs and teller? I mean, the cash is sitting in the branch, but it's going by truck to the cash center and coming back to the branch. This is where we are working now with banks to try to recirculate the cash within a certain banking or retail environment before we send that cash to the cash center.
Okay, thank you very much. Ricardo, there's a follow-up question here, I guess with your comments earlier. If you could, can you share in more detail how the end-to-end concept works?
Okay, the end-to-end concept works as follows. The bank or the financial institution will only drive branding, will only drive banking products and banking services, will not focus on technology, will drive targets along the cash pool, so they own the cash pool, but they say, okay, today I run a cash pool of X billion dollars or X million dollars. Part of the project targets is phase by phase to reduce that by X% year on year. So within 5 years, I would like to see 30% savings in terms of reduction of my cash pool. And this would be integrated in a service model whereby a service provider like Winko Nixdorf can even own the devices, not just run the devices. We can even own them, own the assets. We can drive the devices. We can monitor them. We can cash manage them, replenish them, and do all the work that's supposed to be done by the bank. Of course, that's the extreme part of the story. Yeah? If we want to go one step higher, would be we will be also responsible for the software and for the processes within a branch environment to circulate the cash before we send it to a cash center, reuse it, and take the unfit note out of circulation using, let's say, a technology like our new family of recyclers called Cineo. So the devices will take out of circulation all the unfit notes and will keep the fit ones and reuse them on the teller, reuse them in the self-service, and the excess cash can be sent to the cash room where maybe it can be sent later on to a cash center. The whole job can be done then by a service provider. That's really the end-to-end if we want to look at it from an ideal point of view.
Okay, thanks for that, Ricardo. Maybe this is I have a question for Asa from Kasikorn Bank. Where do you see the key challenges in managing cash efficiently in Thailand today? So what do you think are the key challenges that the Thai banks are facing in terms of cash effectivity and efficiency? Asa from Kasikorn Bank.
Okay, from the point of view in Thailand, we see that we would like to hold the cash on hand with the minimum cost, deposit and for the counting, the sorting process, and to reduce the transportation, the delivery cost as well. So we agree with the recycling system, which would utilize the cash at each cash point, which is quite good fit for ATM and cash deposit machines. And for the viewpoint from the management, so we would like to have the lowest possible inventory for the physical cash.
Okay, thanks for that, Asa. There's another question here. What is the absolute dollar difference between cost of cash handling in emerging versus mature markets? So perhaps I'll hand it over to my colleague Tom, and the rest, Ricardo and Asa, can probably give their comments on that one or their thoughts on that one as we proceed.
Thanks, Mylan, for this question. We tried to really quantify the difference in cost and cash handling of the cost of cash handling between the two markets, but that was very, very difficult, and the findings were not really conclusive because you have so many variables in it. For example, labor costs are totally different. You have exchange rates, you have different levels of technology sophistication. So we didn't really find conclusive results there. But what we have quantified also in the white paper, which you can have a look at, these are just estimates just to make that short, but we have, for example, quantified the difference, how much it costs to operate a branch, how much to operate an off-site ATM, on-site ATM, and CDMs. And there we clearly see that the cost of handling all those are higher in certain markets, but you cannot really distinguish between mature and emerging markets. Well, branches, of course, are more expensive in mature markets, but operating ATMs or CDMs, a bank in Korea and a bank in Taiwan, for example, had very, very low cost on those two. However, a bank in Singapore almost showed the highest cost for those three unit types. Similarly, in emerging markets, there are banks that have very low cost, operational cost of those devices, whereas, for example, a Malaysian bank almost was at the same levels like a Singaporean bank. So please excuse me, we cannot really quantify the monetary difference, but I think it reflects a little bit from the slide that unfortunately I haven't brought it for the presentation today, but download our white paper, you can have a look there. And I hope that could answer some of your points.
Yeah, perhaps I can add a few comments here. I mean, there will be a slight difference in emerging markets. The cost of running ATM networks, for example, might be slightly cheaper than mature markets. However, the gains in mature markets from the efficiencies in the processes will compensate for that cost, because we have seen that in mature markets they have perfected up to a higher degree the process of managing their cash. So in reality they are spending more, maybe in dollar value, not really much more. I agree with Thomas that the differences might be not really dramatic, but they can be actually balanced and offset by efficiencies in the processes. That's our opinion based on also working with several customers across different parts of the globe as well.
Thanks for that, Ricardo. I think Thomas wants to add on to your comment.
Yes, when you look at those two slides that I have presented here, it's not like a numeric, a dollar value that I can give you, but relatively. Of course, and I think that was also Ricardo's point, banks in mature markets have higher operating costs, which are considerably higher than in emerging markets. But when you compare the cash handling cost to total cost, or the cash handling cost to physical channel cost, that these numbers are lower in mature markets than they are in some of the emerging markets. I was surprised that Malaysia and Indonesia also has very low values when it comes to cash handling cost to total operating cost.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Perhaps before we end, let's go for a final word. We'll begin with Ricardo, and then I'll pass it over to Asher, and then finally to my colleague Tom. Final words before we end our teleconsultation today on cash management.
Yeah, from my side, I would like to contribute to this by saying that I think most of us are missing a very important point. It's not only about cash management software. Cash management software has been in our industry for the last 25 years, and just applying a cash management software has not delivered the promise of reducing cash in circulation and getting the optimum volume and so on. It has worked to a certain degree, and I agree it's a good thing to have. However, the real savings will come when you start to bring all the processes in a branch environment to work together. For example, today in every branch across the whole entire Asia Pacific, and I bet you go to any bank, the self-service channel and the cash and self-service channel belongs to a different pool than the cash sitting on the counter area of the branch. And in some cases, these two pools of cash don't come together. And it's transported in a truck somewhere else, even though the cash is in the same physical location, it's not reused. And these are the things we are trying now to change with the new family of solution and products. Actually, we have the same cassette now in an ATM that we have in a deposit system, that we have in a recycling system, that we have in a teller cash recycler. And we have one software to drive them all. So what does it mean? I can remove cassette from my deposit machine because it's full, and I can plug it into my ATM and I dispense the cash without having to ask anyone to transport cash into my branch. And I can do it fully automated with software without having to calculate where do I get the cash from. All these efficiencies will be recommended by the solution. So this is where we're focusing now. Can we reuse the complete pool of cash in a branch of a bank? Can we reuse the complete pool of cash in a retail environment? And the next question is, before I end, is, and that's where really savings will kick in a very big amount. Can we combine retailers and bankers to work together and reuse one pool of cash? And by the way, this new technology I'm referring to, called Cineo, will have also the same cassette on the retail side. So the cassette holding the cash in the retail environment and the cassette holding cash in the banking environment, for the first time in our industry, is the same. And that makes a very big difference.
Thank you for that, Ricardo. Perhaps Asika would like to say a few words on the issue of cash management and cash handling in Asia Pacific. Asa from Capricorn Bank. Okay, there seems to be some technical difficulty with that. So I guess we'll end with my colleague Thomas Zink and his parting words with regards to the key challenges in terms of the role and cost of cash across the delivery channels in Asia Pacific. Tom?
Yeah, as we heard from Ricardo, the technology and software solutions and also the hardware is there. But from our interviews we have with the industry and also how we estimate the industry, it's a very conservative business, and banks, especially when it comes to cash, are a bit cautious about new technologies, about trusting somebody with their money. So we have realized from a lot of banks, the feedback was, yes, we have to bring down our cash handling costs. Yes, we need to streamline, we need to integrate, we need to improve our efficiency. But basically, what most of the banks said is they still want to be in control of where their cash is. They want to adjust how much cash is in which branch and in which ATM. So they really want to stay in control. And that's also where, when we look at the mature markets, most of the developments happen at the moment, or we see most of the developments happening. There's a lot of things going on in forecasting, how to really have the ample amount of cash in an ATM, in a branch. So that is where a lot of banks in mature markets are currently working on. However, no denial, and I believe that through the integration of the cash supply chain, banks can achieve much bigger cost savings than through simply reducing the amount of excessive cash in the machines. So when you really want to bring down the cost, you probably have to increase your trust in service providers and also let go of certain tasks which you rather keep in hand.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this afternoon's teleconsultation. We will send you the proceedings report of this teleconsultation in a few days, and you will be able to access the recording and also the slides from this teleconsultation. Everyone, have a good day. Thank you for our speakers and our panelists, Ricardo, Asa, Titapon, and the rest. Have a good day and have a good